doubt is a fucking poison. Anything that you want to say, any attempt that you want to make, the second that you have that little thing in your brain will be like, why me? Why does my voice matter? Or like, I don't know enough or whatever. I'm like, bro, no matter what it is that you want to achieve in life, there is someone out there stupider, uglier, and meaner than you making a shit fuck ton of money doing it because they're consistent and because they don't doubt themselves. You know what I mean? There's some people who could use a little doubt, right? That's why we have la palabra sin vergüenza, without shame. There are just some people who have no shame and whatever. You know what I'm saying? It's probably good and healthy. I mean, shame is one of the greatest teachers. You know what I'm saying? Look, my shoulders are tense right now, dog. I'm like, I am nervous to be on here talking about shit, right? But, part of the fucking formula here has to be bravery, right? This is not a time for cowards. Cowards will not prevail. Well, they might live, but they won't prevail.
Make no mistake, baby, you fucking with the best of them. My elevator cup will knock the snot about the rest of them. So if you doubt the kid got hard up in his chest, pops, you got me fucked up like ex-cops and gem pop.
Welcome to episode 6 of the Chris Gabo Show. There is no guest this episode. I promise you, I didn't come on here to like have a hot take. I don't know, maybe one day I'll have a whole media system and that'll be like, let's make a hot take so that we can, I don't even like that language. There's so much language that has come to us in the last 10 years that I really like flinch at, that I cringe at, but we're going to have to work through this together because who gives a fuck? Embarrassed in front of who? I don't know. Make a comment saying how stupid I look and whatever. I don't give a fuck, right? I do give a fuck. But I can't let it affect me. If I'm working from that place, it's like a tightrope walker. You can't look down. If you look down and you realize I am up so high and the rope is so thin, you're not going to do the thing. So that's that on doubt. This is a sermon largely about courage and about connection, and that inshallah you receive it from the place where I'm trying to come from, which is humility, right? Which is trying to be like, again, I'm not a political scientist. I'm a rapper and a TV writer. That's not usually like a combination of fucking traits that I'm like, oh, let me see what this fucking guy thinks. Is that Chris Rock joke when he's like, 9/11, what does Ja Rule think? You know what I mean? It's like, and I'm not even Ja Rule. Ja Rule had hits. You know what I'm saying? I'm some guy you don't know. I am an unvetted source. Inshallah, throughout the course of this conversation. Also, this is episode 6, so you can go listen to, 5 other episodes of me talking to my friends and see, like, maybe, I don't know, maybe that's how you vet the source, right? But I did want to come on here to talk about the CEO shooting and process some of my thoughts about it in an attempt to maybe help you make your own connections in your head and in your heart, right? Because, and look, I don't want to be like now more than ever guy, but it would be ignorant and incorrect to say that we're not living in kind of unprecedented times. Do you know what I'm saying? The United States doesn't historically have a lot of revolutionary political violence. We have just regular violence. Normally when people are upset about their lot in life, they don't get together in the United States and let's get a group of people and go kill the king. They're just like, I'm pissed off. It's about me. Let me go shoot up the school or whatever, right? So this is kind of like an interesting moment. Like the fact that the 3Ds that were on the bullet, like that, the bullet casings or whatever, like this is interesting, right? And what's even more interesting is how united the response has been across variances of really, really unlikely ideological bedfellows, right? I believe it was Matt Walsh who was like, he had this YouTube video that was like, this is why the left is celebrating the death of a CEO. The real reason in his comments, and this is a very right-wing guy for y'all not familiar with the motherfucker, and the comments were like, it's not just the left, right? It's not just the left. It's anybody in this country who has ever been forced to try to take care of themselves and their family, right? You know, I was at Cedars-Sinai the other day in the emergency room, and I like have a very privileged life, bro. Like I have WGA health insurance, you know, like theoretically. I mean, I think Cedars-Sinai is in like Beverly Hills. Like this is not like this ain't. In my head, this would be a place that has, you know, where the upper middle class goes to live. And let me tell you, bro, I was there because my fucking sugar was fucked up. I'm diabetic. I had not been taking it seriously. I have this glucose monitor in now, which, like, you know, and alhamdulillah, bro, because, you know, my grandfather, bro, they took one toe a year for 10 years and then he went blind. You know what I'm saying? He had no fucking glucose monitor. And I was not taking care of my shit. And I had gone to the walk-in clinic for some other fucking reason. And then while they were there, they had tested my blood for the sugar. And then they called me and they were like, yo, like, you might go blind. Like, your shit is fucked up. You need to go to the emergency room. And I was like high out of my mind when they called me. So I was like, it was very scary. I called my wife and I was like, hey, I need you to take me to the emergency room right now. Right. And that's what they did. They told me to go to the emergency room. So I went to the emergency room. I was there for 7 hours. Shout out Hisham Faghi, friend of the show, who like pulled up on some real friend shit and just hung out with us for literally like 7-8 hours just for the fucking doctor to be like, are you diabetic? And I was like, what? He was like, oh yeah, you're diabetic. Your sugar's kind of. I was like, you didn't read the fucking chart, bro? Are you fucking serious? Like, he didn't read the chart. He was basically like, I don't know why they sent you here. I'm no expert. And it's like, yeah, no fucking shit, bro. And they basically like gave me a glass of water, and then I went home, and I mean, it was there. They charged me $1,500, and I don't have that. You know what I'm saying? And this is a story from like a guy with a lot of privilege, a guy who's like made some money and has access to like different shit, has a real support system. You know what I mean? So one shudders to think or shudders to know their own experience or the experience of others with even less dealing with the American healthcare system, right? So it's just fascinating to watch the sort of mainstream ruling class media, right? The MSNBCs, the New York Times, you know, all these sort of like respectable outlets process the fact that there is no sympathy for this fucking ghoul. And the thing that made me go, oh, I need to just do an episode by myself where I talk about this and process some of this, was when I started seeing the media hits that were like, despicable. These people, despicable. I understand being upset at the healthcare system, and it's not perfect, but murder is not how you get your way. And I went, okay, I actually have to get on the show because murder is how everyone's gotten their way. Murder is how America gets its way, you know? And obviously, this is in the context of a year where, you know, the American government is literally funding a genocide in Palestine, and then also funding a genocide by proxy in Sudan through their support of the UAE, right? Murder is how we get our way. I know that a lot of the listeners of the show come to hear me talk about art, and not just me, like me talk to my friends about art, because the only thing that I'm really proud of in this life, honestly, is the people in it. You know, I say this all the time, the people in your life are your life, and I'm proud of that. It's a thing that's like easy to brag about, because it's not like you're saying like, oh, I'm so fucking good, I can, it's just like, yo, my friends are beautiful people, you know, and they're really, really intelligent people. And I learned that in talk radio, in talk show, like the best pre-production in the world is a 20-year relationship. You know, if you haven't listened to episode 5 with Sila Reyes, it's an episode called Your Enemies Are My Enemies. We really, I mean, yes, we're talking about art, but it's two people who've like, you know, whose ambitions have lived alongside each other for 17 years. You know what I'm saying? So like mostly thus far, I think those are the episodes that have been successful. But my initial instinct for the show, and look, I had to get it out quick. I was like, if I don't, I've been talking about starting the show for a fucking year, and I was like, if I don't start now and let it be imperfect, it ain't gonna happen. It ain't gonna happen. So I kind of just like pressed record and started putting shit out, right? But the initial thought was, I was like, hey, the X and Y axis of my life are, rap media and, leftist media that is largely white. I'm not saying that all leftist media is white. I'm just saying that the shit that I consume, which is like basically Chapo Trap House, Rev Left Radio, True Anon, those people are white. You know what I'm saying? Mostly white. And the culture is white. Whether or not the people, here's the thing. Culture is it's not about skin color as much as it is. I mean, like, obviously skin color dictates how you're treated in the world, right? But it's a cultural lens. That's why I don't necessarily talk about, obviously I'm Latino, whatever. But like, it's hip hop is a cultural lens. Shout out the dead homie Mums. Okay, the Wisconsin boss. Mums used to say, hip hop is my country, right? And by that, I'm like, yes, I'm able to see what the point of view is. You know what I'm saying? It's the filter. Right? So my initial thing was, I was like, hip hop, leftist politics, those are the two things that matter to me. Those are the two sort of subject matters that you would end up hearing me talk about or ask you about if you were on my couch and I was passing the aux cord and just like showing you shit and you were showing me shit or whatever, right? Quickly, I realized that that I know more about music and art than I do about politics. Like, I have some big feelings. I've read a little bit, but like, if we were just going to talk about, I don't know, DMX, if we were going to talk about Just Blaze and his production style, I'd be sitting in the chair like this. I'd be like relaxed. I wouldn't be thinking, oh, I look fat. And I would just be chilling. But the second you're like, oh, we're going to talk to Chris about Marxism, I'd be like, I could do 15 minutes on it. I could do, here's what I think I believe. You know what I'm saying? Even though, that's why I admire the Chapo guys so much. I know that like some people don't like, the way they use certain language, and it is a very like, male-centric space and all this shit, and I am a man. I apologize. Let me start off by saying I apologize for being a man, and I'm like not really being that sarcastic. But what I admire about, the Felix Biedermans of the world is that like they know a lot of history. They know the names and the dates. So when they argue with you, they're not arguing feelings. The feelings power the information. And, I think that in the scheme of things, I am an extremely high information, like political media consumer, right? But it's nerve-wracking to talk about politics because politics is talking about the world. It's talking about morality. You know what I mean? And part of the impetus to do this show was that I was like, this particular episode was that I was like, okay, I think I need to do an episode that's just me speaking directly and processing from a place of a little information and a little ignorance. Because, one of the many problems with the left, and particularly the American left, is that it is an unhospitable place oftentimes because there's an emphasis on purity. There is an emphasis on litmus tests. There's that old Marxist proverb, which I think bears out to be true, which is that the right looks for converts, the left looks for traitors. And you can see it, right? There's a reason why on the left we call our enemy the reactionary right. It's reactionary American thought. It doesn't even make sense to label it the Republicans, the GOP, the whatever the fuck, because it's ultimately completely reactionary thought that doesn't have any ideological coherence. And if you allow me to share an anecdote. So the story goes like this. Basically, the FBI had just infiltrated the KKK, and they found that it was pretty easy to infiltrate the KKK. All you had to do to infiltrate the Ku Klux Klan was be white. They didn't ask a lot of questions like, you hate these guys? Cool. Come on in, Bring some potato salad to the fucking cookout or whatever. I don't know if they call it a cookout. Whatever the fuck the KKK calls their shit. And then that same year, the FBI tried to infiltrate a leftist anarchist group. And the story goes that they get the guy in, right? It's easy to plant an undercover initially. And then 2 weeks later, the guy comes to the FBI field office and he's like, oh, fuck, Jesus Christ. You got to get me out of there. And the FBI people were like, why? And he's like, because they keep asking me questions. They're like, have you read this? What do you think about this person? Blah, 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 blah. You know how Lucy Parsons said this and Mark said that. And he was like, I haven't read enough, right? I love that story because it emphasizes the fundamental point that you have to have knowledge and rigor to have ideological coherence. And look, it's difficult to have a cohesive ideology. I understand that there are inherent contradictions in what I profess to believe, how I behave, and what I consume, what I admire, And frankly, like, not to be like everyone is a snowflake who's important, blah, 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 but like the reason why I thought maybe this podcast would have some valiance outside of like my mom wanting to see what's going on with me, like the reason why I thought maybe this could reach some people was because, sometimes I feel like I live in like 4 different worlds, but I definitely live in at least 2. You know what I'm saying? And I think that, and without, at the risk of writing like a first generation immigrant kid fucking diaspora poem here, the majority of my life is about translation. My days are about translation, As a narrative writer, it's about the translation of a thought or a sound into drama. As an MC, it's about translating a feeling or an idea into a rhyme, into a chorus, into production, right? But also, I'm like literally translating all the fucking time between my social groups, And look, I understand that this shit is not, people don't necessarily believe what you believe just because they're your friends. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's difficult for me often to bridge the cultural chasms, right? But it's a thing that because I don't know why I would say I'm a people pleaser, but I definitely want this person to be at the party and this person to also be at the party. And in order for that to work, you have to be like, hey, whoa, I think what they're trying to say is this. And hey, just because they like this doesn't mean that they're like opposed, they're your enemy or whatever, you know what I'm saying? And maybe that's the young diplomat in me or whatever. But I do think that the 2 primary vectors that I'm translating between are often hip hop culture, which is, it's a black and brown medium. It is a medium that came from literally the Bronx during the Lindsay administration as a reaction to the fact that, the Lindsay administration was like, fuck these black and brown kids. They don't need fucking learning. They don't need to learn French literature. Let them go teach, let them go learn how to fucking repair air conditioners. You know what I mean? And because of that, right? Because of that technical aspect in New York City public schools at the time, these kids in the Bronx became very technical, right? And that's why the turntables, all this shit, right? That's why you get, Grand Wizard Theodore plugging the turntable into the street lamp and all this technical shit. It was innovation as a result of oppression, right? It was innovation as a result of socioeconomic disenfranchisement, right? But then when the genre grow, and again, we just celebrated Hip Hop 50 recently, bro. This is not if you're my age, your parents are much older than hip hop. So we're talking about a medium that like has micro generations that are 2 years long. You know what I'm saying? And because the dominant hip hop narrative is rags to riches, and by the way, I grew up middle class. My parents were poor. I don't pretend to like be in lockstep with that narrative, right? In my own personal life, right? But I understand it. I also understand that I would not have the middle class resources that I had if it wasn't for my parents' knowledge of poverty and like how they came up and all. I understand my class journey, right? And I also understand that for other people, you think of like the Jay-Z example, right? And it's like, obviously like sometimes I have this moment with my leftist friends who are white and also not white, but not black, who are like, fuck Jay-Z, fuck Beyonce, blah, blah. And I'm like, yo, check me out. I hear you. They are certainly capitalists and they certainly make decisions that I would not make. But Jay is not the same as Elon Musk because Jay is Shakespeare. His bars are in the DNA infrastructure of American history. And I don't say Shakespeare just because I'm like, oh, I'm just picking a name that I think white people respect. No. Shakespeare because Shakespeare is in everything. You've watched Lion King, you know Shakespeare a little bit. You know what I mean? You watch any sort of like, and all the big, you watch fucking Succession. Those are Shakespearean stakes, Shakespearean arcs. It's fucking King Lear. It's Macbeth. It's all this palace intrigue shit. Shakespeare's in the DNA, right? Jay-Z is also in the DNA. So I'm not going to sit here and like argue different things that Jay has done and that like I would disagree with. But I'm going to say like, yo, like sometimes when I hear the left like saying those names first, especially from look, I don't want to get in black people's business, bro. Like to hear black leftists talk about Jay and Beyonce, that's y'all. You know what I mean? I'm very grateful to be in community with black people largely because of hip hop shit, but I am not directly in that community. So I'm like, there's moments that I stay out. If you want to criticize Jay, cool, right? Trust me, I love not being in a conversation, bro. Jesus fucking Christ. I love being like, that's not for me. But when like white and non-black leftists talk about Jay and Beyonce first, I go, yo, these are American descendants of African slaves in the Americas. And y'all think you believe in reparations? Isn't there perhaps some salience to the idea that them becoming billionaires the way they did is a form of reparation? So like maybe shut the fuck up until it's time to, you know what I'm saying? Like there's a million other motherfuckers to talk about first. Okay. And that, what I just said, that I don't know how to call it a story or like an idea or just like a feeling that I have, that articulation is honestly like a sort of snapshot of the intersections that I'm often finding myself at, right? And those are somehow often the easier conversations to have, right? As my politics grow more radical, there are other conversations that are more difficult to have, right? And this is where I go, okay, I used to have a teacher who would say, like, turn a scar into a star, steer into the skid, right? And so the fact that I'm like, my palms are literally sweating. I'm like nervous trying to talk about this shit, especially without a guest that I can throw a question to, or defer to, or ask a question to. Again, if we were talking about Jadakiss' catalog, I would be so relaxed. I would just be like, money, ganja, bread, let's all whatever. You know what I mean? Like I would probably be smoking weed, honestly. I'd be more relaxed. Here, I thought about smoking before this. Also, I don't know if you're allowed to smoke on YouTube or like there's like a monetization thing. I don't fucking know, but I just felt like, to quote Stephen Adly Guirgis, in Our Lady of 121st Street, one of the characters says, hey Vic, you want some you want some of this? He hands him some like a whiskey or whatever. He's like, why? He was like, it'll take your edge off. And he goes, I prefer my edge on, pal. And I think that all the time. I'm like, I prefer my edge on, But I was like, hey, maybe the fact that I don't have all the answers, maybe the fact that I am not like, I can't even wag a finger at you because I don't know everything, right? Maybe that could be, and I don't know, man. Like, I don't want to be here calling my own shit refreshing. We're like, oh, a refreshing take. But I know that for me, and again, I say this all the time, it's like when I started this show, I was very clear about the fact I am a user and a pusher of this podcast shit, of the Patreon shit. So I'm trying to be very like intentional about only giving you something that I would also want. And one thing that I often want from a leftist perspective is a little fucking humility. Just a little bit, right? So that's where that's the channel that I'm trying to navigate through, right? And particularly on this subject of the murder of the CEO, right? The analogy that I wanted to draw, the thing I wanted to open up, right, is intended to be communicated specifically to my friends who they might be like, yo, I think I believe what Chris believes. Or I think I believe some of it. Or I think that maybe we have, we agree on certain things, but maybe some of the things, I've had friends who literally like have said to me, bro, like and I don't think my politics are that radical. I actually like often, and again, this is a symptom of being in a certain sector of the left where you're always flagellating yourself. You're like, I'm not left enough. Oh, I'm not radical enough. Oh, which like, whatever. But I don't think my politics are that. I think if my politics were more radical, maybe I wouldn't be trying to be in Hollywood, in broadcast. Maybe I wouldn't be, I don't know. Maybe I'd be only wearing like a burlap sack that was, ethically sourced from whatever the fuck. So I don't think my shit is that radical. But I've had friends be like, yo, I would love to rock with you artistically. I would love to be standing next to you in the photo and we all kind of like, but your politics scare me and I don't know what you're going to say. And the time that a friend said that to me, I was really humbled. I was like, I appreciate you saying that. I appreciate you being honest about that, right? And that was a moment that I realized, I was like, yeah, like there is maybe an opportunity here to talk to people. And again, like I said, that the audience for this is like my friends who, etc. But obviously it's public, it's on YouTube. It's not just like people I fucking know, man. I hope that this reaches people who might be in a similar ideological space of like, I feel something around this shooting. I feel something around the Palestine shit. I feel something around capitalism. I feel something, but I might not have the tools with which to articulate it into a political position, or I might be scared to, right? Because, and I don't want to be like, oh, like, because that was me and I am just like you. Well, I mean, I am just like you. And it was me, not even in the past. It's me now. You know what I mean? Like, I'm very moved when Norman Finkelstein talks about his parents being like the primary locus of his morality. Norman Finkelstein on True and On talking about how he was processing October 7th, right? And his parents are Holocaust survivors. For those of you who don't know Norman Finkelstein, he's an incredible academic, Jewish academic who has been pro-Palestine for longer than like any of us and has written some of the seminal literature on Israeli war crimes and just a very, very intelligent, fierce advocate, right? And his advocacy comes from his parents being Holocaust survivors, right? My parents are not Holocaust survivors, but my parents are my litmus test for morality, right? So sometimes when I articulate a political position, I go, what would my mother think? What would my father think? Would it offend them? Would it make them think they didn't raise me right? And oftentimes what it comes down to is not that they're offended by it. It's often that they're like, no, we get it, but like, papito, is this smart to say this shit out loud? And that remains to be fucking seen. You know what I mean? Ask me in 10 years, you know what I'm saying? But my primary medium is feelings. Like, I do think there's intellectual rigor in the work, but I come from a feeling place. I didn't endeavor to be an artist because of the rigor of thought. That came later. I came to hip hop because it was a feeling, right? I came to punk rock because it was a feeling. I came to theater because it was a feeling, So I hope that coming from that place allows it, and by it I mean this conversation or this monologue that, inshallah becomes a conversation in your own head, that it hits the tendon because it's just essentially coming from look, man, it's the bolero of a broken heart, right? when people were in the comments of all these articles and shit about the CEO being murdered and everyone ha 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 and all this shit, it's interesting for the mainstream centrist media to chastise that, to say how uncouth, how terrible, how whatever, where we've lost our morals, whatever, where I'm like, yo, I can get behind that if it's equally distributed. And obviously, you don't have to be a political scientist to understand that it is not equally distributed, right? You know, they say, you really think that murder is the way to get your point across? I'm like, babe, aren't you talking as like a mouthpiece of American empire? You don't think that murder is how the American empire gets its point across every single time historically? How all empires get their point across historically? And the reason why I was like, it took me a second to go like, okay, there's no script for this, but I did kind of make notes about like where I wanted to go. And the initial point I wanted to make, coming from a feeling place, is around this idea of self-defense, right? I want to throw in this little clip of the host of Rev Left Radio saying something that I had not heard articulated, right? Where he said, the American public has a right to defend itself against these fucking vampires, you know? And when he said a right to defend, obviously the first thing that I thought was this thing of, you know, this talking point that we often hear from the Zionists, which is Israel has a right to defend itself. And let's say for a moment that I agree with that, which I do not, because I understand Israel to be a colonial power that is imposing itself on an indigenous population, right? An imperial outpost of the United States and their interests, et cetera, et cetera. But let's say for a second, right, that I'm like, yeah, Israel has a right to defend itself. Well, then the follow-up question is, does Palestine have a right to defend itself? And the answer from that side is no, right? So there, already, you don't have to be a political scientist to see the fucking inequality, right? And you can draw that clear parallel to the United Healthcare shit, where it's like, okay, this CEO, you know, his family has a right to mourn and the other CEOs have a right to get security and scrub their names from whatever. That's them defending themselves. They have a right to like arm their houses with, you know, guards and all this stuff. But do we, the American people, and dude, if I don't know, man, there's some stuff that I still say like the American people. I don't give a fuck about America, bro. I give a fuck about human beings. But yes, because it's happened in America and this is a very rare instance of American political violence with like a purpose, right? You know, America, we love violence, but it's not often political violence. We don't like usually click up and to make a point. We usually just like go fucking shoot a bunch of third graders or whatever. So this is an interesting moment, right? To see this as self-defense now puts us into a uniquely American dichotomy. I'm from Florida, bro. I'm from a stand your ground state. You know what I mean? And like, look, that law pretty much only has anti-black racist implications in practice, right? That's why George Zimmerman was able to fucking kill Trayvon Martin and there's like no consequences. You're like, if you're the right person and you can say that you were scared, right? And actually, you know, I don't 100% know if stand your ground laws were cited in that exact tragedy, but I know that those laws are often weaponized against black people historically and towards the interests of white homeowners, right? That being said, I often, you know, think that it's an important ideological touch point to bring up, this idea of stand your ground, the right to defend yourself or whatever. It's a Second Amendment shit, right? It's a thing that historically reactionary thought has rallied around, right? There's a reason why, you know, the GOP aligns itself with the NRA, whatever, right? It seems to be a fundamental belief. And look, the thing about the Trump shit is that, hey, mask off. Maybe they're just saying, it's not, we all have a right to defend ourselves. It is white landowners of a certain class that have the right to defend themselves. Maybe they'll say that soon, right? And maybe there is not that much of a point in pointing out the hypocrisy, but let's just do it so we can get down to the fucking basics for a second. The thing that I'm trying to get across, that I do believe that if you sit with this thought for a second, can be a radicalizing thought experiment, is, okay, if we all have the right to defend ourselves, even take it out of this is language that's in an American context, but let's take it out of the American context. Let's take it just to like regular playground rules. You hit me, I hit you, right? If you believe that human beings inherently have a right to defend themselves, that is a very powerful, very simple framework to understand the history that is unfolding around us. And perhaps that feeling that comes from the understanding, and that feeling is often rage, right? That feeling is often heartbreak. That feeling can often be despair. My hope is that through a discussion, a dialogue, a series of monologues that create dialogue in your head and in your communities, through all that fucking shit, we can, as a community, metabolize these ideas into radical action, right? Because the fact of the matter is, this is the thing that people often say, there are more of us than there are of them. That's true. And by us, I mean anybody who works for a wage. And by them, I mean the literal ruling class. Like, I think one of the things for me is that I used to be afraid of getting made fun of, right? I'll be like, the ruling class, or this and that. They're like, oh, Chris, it's the man. It's Chris is railing against the man because he needs something to whatever. I'm like, yo, fuck off. Kiss my ass, bro. Like, yeah, there is a ruling class. And making fun of that kind of language is literally trying to silence the normalization of an articulation of a point of view, which is seeing the world for what it is. There is a ruling class and there's everybody else, right? It's a feudal system. It always has been, right? So, I mean, it's interesting, because the fact that all the comments across mediums are all basically saying that this guy is a hero. And at the very, on the left, you hear this guy's a hero. Whoever shot the CEO is a fucking hero. And I believe that. He is a hero. At the very least, even if people aren't saying he's a hero, it's the jokey joke of like, I didn't see shit because my fucking eye insurance got denied or whatever, right? Everyone's making that joke. And what does that tell you, right? It tells you that this hit a nerve for the majority of human beings in America. And because we live in an America-centric world, right? Because the rest of the world is at the mercy of American imperialism, it's what a lot of motherfuckers believe internationally, right? Now, what do we do with that information, right? And linking it to Palestine, linking it to Israel and the United States and, the double standards present in the implication of violence, that's where I go, okay, without trying to bite off more than we can chew here. And by the way, I can't chew much, you know what I'm saying? I'm like trying to articulate these thoughts, but I don't want to go too far afield. Take the instance of the CEO killing. Take the idea articulated by my man when he said the American public has the right to defend itself. Then take the idea that Palestine does not have the right to defend itself in the eyes of the American imperial powers, in the eyes of Israel, right? Now, at the very least, we don't have to be political scientists to go, there's an underdog and there's an oppressor, right? And it's funny, the thing about, and look, I'm not the first fucking person to make this point, but it's interesting, right? That Americans, when we watch Lord of the Rings or the Hunger Games or whatever the thing, whenever there's small guy, big guy, we always root for the underdog. We always root for the, and not only do we root for the underdog because we're Americans and we're bloodthirsty and we're like, oh, we can't wait for the little guy to bloody the fucking big guy's nose, right? We can't fucking wait. Like, break a chair over his head. Oh. But then it's like there's something that happens. Like, the osmosis doesn't occur. It doesn't often translate into the dominant political point of view, right? And I think that inability to translate visceral feeling into political ideology is a result of the fucking media that we ingest on the other end of it. Not the, well, yes, there is obviously propaganda, Western propaganda, in all of Hollywood shit, right? But also the news, right? Like so much of the reason why I felt like I was like, okay. Because there was a moment, where I was like, dude, maybe you're out of your league with this fucking politics shit. Just talk about DMX and TV writing and whatever. Then I was like, no, man, because I know that the places that I've grown to get information from, because they've changed so much in the past 2 years, right? And because most of my friends and family are not consuming those as much as I like try to, steer them in that direction, as much as most of my friends and family still read the New York Times, and hey, I occasionally read the New York Times because I'm trying to figure out. Now I'm like, as my media literacy increases, I'm like, oh, I know what to read for, right? And it is important while boycotting the Times to still fucking find a way to get some access to it for me so that I can have a fucking take on what the primary, it's the paper of record. It's crazy that they coined that. That's fucking crazy, right? So I'm like, okay, if my friends and family, just to start, and granted, in order for this shit to be successful, mad motherfuckers that aren't my friends and family, you have to subscribe to this shit. And hey, if you are that person, if we don't know each other and you're hip to this and you have a point of view about this show and you like this shit and you want to make it better and you want to give me your opinion, I'm a big listening motherfucker. Like, I love listening to opinions, bro. Like, that's kind of the only reason why I like narrative writing, is because I like what other people think. It's interesting to me, And, I have a very specific media diet, and it's not a media diet that's shared by the majority of my community. So I was like, okay, at the very least, if like 30 people in my life who I'm close to who are listening to this show to support me or to hear the sound of my voice because they miss me from another part of their life or whatever, I'm like, okay, I'm going to use this opportunity to, yes, talk about all the art shit I want, but I also I want to talk about my own news consumption and maybe steer some people in a couple directions, right? Directions that are ideologically thoughtful and that, inshallah, provide some fucking value, One of the, to me, most important things about, like, to me, let me put it this way. To me, one of the most important questions to ask when you're consuming media is, you're like, well, okay, well, who's funding this? Do you know what I'm saying? Whose interests are at stake here, right? And again, the New York Times is an arm of capital. It always has been an arm of capital. And those motherfuckers have never met a war that they don't like. The people who were wrong about the Iraq war, it's like there's no consequences for them, right? And these are the same people who are like saber rattling against China and Iran. This is all like neocon, like Cold War ideology. You know what I'm saying? And super Zionist, super pro-police, super pro-capitalism, that's the lens, right? So one of the first things that I had to do in like re-articulating my media diet was I was like, is there anybody here who is doing the indie version of this? Are there any journalists who are like independent and who've like clicked up the way that like a band goes, hey, we're not going to sign to a major. We're going to be direct to consumer and we're going to, make a Patreon and all this shit. And the answer is yes, right? Drop site news has been extremely important in my life. I think that Ryan Grimm and Jeremy Satchel are like two incredibly, incredibly smart journalists who, again, the whole point, and they were at The Intercept, which I trusted The Intercept. I like The Intercept a lot. And even that for them, they were like, nah, we want to be completely independent. And they started Drop Site News, and I think I think they're doing an incredible job. Another thing that I would extremely recommend is there's a podcast called Citations Needed. I'm going to drop in a little clip here from their shit because Citations Needed, the whole thing is about media literacy, right? And you can start from episode 1 over there, and like it really does a beautiful, beautiful job of showing you how to read the news from mainstream media from a leftist perspective. And it is fucking eye-opening. It is fucking eye-opening. The last thing I would recommend is the Electronic Intifada, which if you're not up on them, I mean, nobody, in my opinion, is closer to the ground on Palestine. Very few media outlets have the access to and the trust with the community in Palestine to be able to do the reporting they're doing. Drop Site News, the Electronic Intifada, Citations Needed. That's those 3 things I would recommend just off rip, And look, political ideology doesn't happen overnight, right? And it's okay to not know. It's also okay to be scared, bro, because the thing about it is that the more honest you are about the visceral reaction to oppression, the more the only solution becomes revolution. And revolution is uncomfortable. Some people don't survive that shit. Most people don't survive that shit. And I don't just mean violence. I mean like, dude, right now, they are fucking cracking down on anybody who's pro-Palestine across nonprofits, across campuses. It's chilling political discussion in Hollywood. I can't talk about that shit right now, but it's chilling political discussion in writers' rooms. It's chilling political discussion with, in between, where everyone's like, is someone going to snitch on me or something? You know what I mean? Like, there are WhatsApp groups of motherfuckers like doxing people and shit. If you guys don't know what the Canary Mission is, go look. Without me telling you, look up the Canary Mission. Just Google it. See what comes up. Not even going to say shit. Just Google the Canary Mission and tell me that the odds aren't stacked against anybody who is pro-Palestine, right? And that is all surrounding the idea of who has the right to defend themselves, right? One of the things that I saw after January 6th was, liberals being like, ha ha ha, these guys are terrorists. They're on the no-fly list and like taking, gleeful joy in all that shit because these were MAGA chuds and whatever. And I understand where you're coming from. As a motherfucker who has traditionally had issues at the fucking airport and who has family who has real issues at the fucking airport, and who also was radicalized post 9/11 in the Iraq war days, and like that's where the beginning of my political opinions came from. I understand the impulse to call people you hate or people who you disagree with politically terrorists. But I want to offer some pushback on that entire project. The word terrorism, the word terrorist, it's not a helpful word. Even when you think you're like, the Buddha says about anger that, anger is like holding a hot rock to throw at someone else because it would eventually burn you. That's how the word terrorism works. It's like you lob it at someone else and then you realize that shit is coming back to you and it's going to haunt you because you are contributing to the validity of that language. Let's think about what terrorism means for a second. Terrorism means violence against a group of people where the ideological reason for the violence is not in line with dominant political thought, right? And again, like, I know how to fucking press buttons. If I was just like, the United States military is a terrorist organization, the IDF is a terrorist organization, all, I know people who have that point of view, and I probably would have at one point said all those things to like, piss people the fuck off and get people in the comments or whatever. But I'm 34 years old. I have high blood pressure. Let's chill the fuck out for a second. The other way to metabolize that feeling and that ideology is to go, who has a right to defend themselves? Why is Hamas a terrorist organization and the IDF is not a terrorist organization? Well, that's because empire is always justified in violence, and the oppressed are never justified in their violence. That's what it boils down to. You think about, like, why isn't Hamas? They voted for Hamas. You know what I mean? Motherfuckers voted them in, right? We say, we love democracy. So if you vote in a political party and it's like every country on earth has a military except for the people who aren't allowed to. So if I was going to tone down the rhetoric and not just start a fight by being like, the IDF is terrorists and the United States government is terrorists, and like, again, I am sympathetic to where that point of view comes from. But the word terrorism is not a real word. It's garbage language. The word you should use is military. It's armed response. It's military. Everybody, dude, I hate that I have to like say it in these stupid of terms, but like either everyone has the right to defend themselves or nobody does. And especially when you're talking to people in America who like are inundated with this conversation of the Second Amendment and stand your ground, all this shit. Let's just start from there. There is no such thing as terrorism. There is only violence. There is only people who are allowed to do violence. There is only, when we're talking about geopolitical shit, it's military, right? So you got to ask yourself, what does it mean for someone to not be allowed to have a military recognized by modern political thought? What does that tell you, right? It means that those people are not deemed to be human. That's all it is. If you're not allowed to have a military, you're not allowed to get scrappy. You're not allowed to defend your position. You're not allowed to because I was working on this show, Mo, and one of the conversations that we had in the room, there was a character that was like a white Texas good old boy, right? And there was some conversation around like, this character is supposed to speak to Middle America, and the issue of Palestine is controversial in Middle America. And the thing that I didn't get this across in the room, no one wanted to fucking do this, but the thought that I kept bringing to the table was I was like, wouldn't it be interesting to have a scene where Mo talks to this guy, Buddy, and explains to him his family's political situation in Palestine, where they kicked them out of their fucking house, and then hear Buddy be like, why don't you get some guns? Get some guns and shoot those motherfuckers off your porch, right? And I thought, I was like, I'm not a big comedy writer, but I thought that was number one funny, and also that's the point. To see somebody, because if you create a character, right, that is a white, Southern, good old boy, gun-toting NRA motherfucker, and assume that they don't have geopolitical language around the mores regarding Israel and like what you're allowed to say and what you're not allowed to say, if you just explain the fundamental nuts and bolts of who did what to whom, it ain't complicated. They go, defend your shit. That obviously did not end up on the fucking show. But I bring that up just to say that that's the conversation I want to have with motherfuckers. Is like, boil it down. Boil it down. Because when you take away one of the greatest fucking the greatest pieces of wool that was pulled over motherfuckers' eyes in the propaganda machine of the Zionist project is it's complicated. Dude, I had a friend for many years who he does not fuck with me anymore, who was, Israeli, and like we came up in some art shit and like we made art together, and I didn't know that much. I didn't know. I kind of just didn't talk about whatever. As we got to know each other more, I realized like, oh, we have like fundamental. It ain't gonna work, right? But one of the things that I kept telling myself in order to like allow myself to have that friendship, I was like, it's complicated. My parents would be like, yo, don't get into that shit. It's complicated, but it's not. It's not complicated at all. And when you break it down to, does someone have the right to defend themselves or not? It gets really, really simple. But when you have point of views that are in direct opposition to the ruling class, to the powers that be, you have to be smarter. You have to be smarter. There's just like, there's no room for you to be like, you're going to get knocked off your square if you don't know what you're talking about, if you don't have dates, if you can't start, talking about the Great March of Return and all this shit. Like, if you don't have facts, motherfuckers are going to knock you the fuck out. And you're going to be kicked out of your job. You're going to be kicked out of your school. You're going to be kicked out of certain rooms. You're going to be blackballed, all this shit, right? So, like, it's important to have information. One great book that I would recommend, I have it here somewhere. Oh, shit, hold on. Yo, camera, come back. Fuck, I shouldn't have done that. In regards to Israel specifically, this book, An Army Like No Other, read that shit. That'll tell you some motherfucking shit. And by the way, information is important. They fucking, when this guy Ham was, what's this guy's name? Well, my man, Ham, I just want to make sure I was saying it right. When my man wrote this book, motherfuckers were like stealing his hard drives and shit. Because right-wing imperial ideology, they don't like facts. They don't like history. They don't like motherfuckers to take notes because it's like, well, you killed 6 million people on this day. And they're like, yeah, we don't love that you have that information. And now we're in the information age, right? And we're in a country that like is supposed to like protect people's right to free speech. That's going away. I mean, that never existed. But in the way that we understood it to exist, that shit is out the fucking window. You know what I mean? So I bring all that up just to say that, like, I might start a Discord or something. Obviously, like, if you want to go to the patreon.com/the Chris Gabo show, starting some conversations in there. I want to use this as a way to start conversations. Obviously, this is a literal monologue, so to call it a dialogue is incorrect and hilarious. But inshallah, bro, like, this will be a jumping off point for conversation, and I really want to build a community, And the reason why I felt like it was important to draw a line between the CEO shooting and the Palestine shit is because it brings you down to the fundamental question of who has the right to defend themselves, right? If private health insurance has a right to say you don't get to be alive because you're poor, that's violence. And if you say cheering for the guy that profited off of that is bad, then you're saying that anyone who has been denied health care and who has literally had family members be killed from being denied health care doesn't have the right to defend themselves. And obviously, the reason why this is more of a unifying flashpoint is because across political ideology in America, most people have experienced the bullshit of the American healthcare system. And it's an open population, right? It's the motherfuckers are everywhere. The reason why Palestine is a more difficult issue is because those people are a trapped population in an open air concentration camp in a very small region of the world that, there's literally killing journalists and shit. It's a media blackout, right? So I felt like it was important to link those two ideas. And all I have to say as I close out here is I encourage you to just think about this. Think about who has the right to big feeling? Who has the right to violence as a means of protecting themselves? And if you just like let that sit around in your head, you're like, yo, who gets to defend their shit? Who doesn't? That is a very, very easy way to, first of all, begin conversations with people around you, your friends, your family, people who like you might, because everyone has that person in their life where they're like, and I have a couple friends who are going through it right now where you're like, you know, I like this individual. I think they quote unquote have a good heart. I think they're a good person, but they have political beliefs that are in direct contradiction to this idea of them as a good person. Look, we're not going to get anywhere through, flogging people with ideology and making people feel terrible and all this shit. But look, at the end of the day, you are a piece of shit if you believe that certain people don't have the right to defend themselves, right? And obviously, because the Zionist project is a project that has relevance to all parts of society, because it is ultimately a capitalist ideology and an imperial ideology, which is all to say that you see more Zionists the higher up you go on the financial ladder. And by the way, motherfuckers are like, oh, this is anti-Semitic. Yo, first of all, I just want to say a quick thing, and I hate that I have to say this. My great-grandfather, Itzhak Mardashvili, he ended up in Barranquilla, Colombia, hijo de puta carajo mal parido, because he escaped the motherfucking pogroms, so suck my fucking dick, okay? You want to come in with that shit? Meet me in public. Let's have that conversation. I'm happy to have that conversation, okay? So, number one, if we're going to play identity politics, let's play some fucking identity politics in this motherfucker, okay? That's one. But number two, there is anti-Semitism on the left. There is. And a lot of people I know are not calling it out because they're scared. Everyone's scared. So here's just a little fucking tips and tricks for calling out anti-Semitism on the left while also not getting knocked off your square. When someone is like, well, you say that, the Zionist project is more prevalent in the upper class of the financial system and whatever, and that's anti-Semitic. No, bro. Listen. Zionism is a capitalist ideology. The reason why it's fucked up is it has nothing to do with Judaism. Judaism is a beautiful fucking religion, bro. And there are I'm getting really pissed the fuck off about people who are like, and again, people that I might agree with, that might be about the shits, you know what I mean? That really might be on the side of revolution and all this stuff and free Palestine shit, but who say legitimately anti-Semitic shit and who are like, oh, Judaism is the religion of both. And I'm like, kiss my fucking ass, bro. Some of the bravest fucking people who I've met out here organizing are Jewish people who understand that none of us are safe unless all of us are fucking safe. And those people, homies of mine, shout out Josh the Word, man. Shout out motherfuckers who are really doing the fucking work, right? I'm always going to defend my homies of all religions and all whatevers because you have to. If not, you're a fucking coward. So that's just getting that the fuck out of the way. Anyway, goddamn. I have high blood pressure. I shouldn't be doing that. Okay. This next song. No, I'm just kidding. Why am I yelling? I'm yelling because this is the point of view of a broken heart. You know what I'm saying? I wake up sick every morning, bro. I wake up sick every morning because I'm just like, there's a Holocaust happening right outside our doors. And if you think that Palestine is far away from you, it's like, bro, let me tell you, Earth is this big. We're all in this together. Capitalism, empire, the drawing of lines, to quote my beautiful wife, Safia Hillo, what is a country but the drawing of a line? You know what I'm saying? We're all in this shit together. We're all in this shit together. And the enemy is the ruling class because they keep us from health and safety, right? The difference, honestly, The difference between liberals and I do run in circles that say, oh, these fucking dumb libs and all this stuff, and liberal is a slur where I come from, right? 100%. But the difference often between a liberal and a leftist is just the articulation of an enemy. You've heard the saying that, manners are the weapons of the aristocracy, right? That's true. Because the second that someone is like, we should all be civil. We should all just be civil. We can't. Dude, civility? You don't have to fucking have read Heart of Darkness to know that civility is an anti-black, colonial, racist fucking word. You know what I'm saying? So civilization, that has been the idea of civilization. That's Western language. That is European settler colonial language that has been wielded against indigenous people of the Americas, among many, many, many others, right? Including Palestinians, including the entire continent of Africa, including anybody who's not these European settlers, right? The word civilization is used to justify barbarism, right? So we're not going to, if there's a problem with the language or whatever, we're just switch it off or go somewhere else. Go fucking listen to Michael Barbaro's ass. You know what I'm saying? Hey, we could do Michael Barbaro numbers though. We be in here. All this to say, thank you for listening. I'm not going to talk much more. I do just want to say that to anybody out there who feels like, yo, I believe you. I believe the people on the ground. I have certain feelings that are in alignment with different people, but I can't articulate them because I work a job that isn't going to allow for that. I have less privilege. I have less power. I feel you. I have friends who come up to me all the time, bro, who work regular jobs and be like, yo, I rock with you. I think all that stuff, but I work at Target, so you feel me, though? And I'm like, 100% I feel you, bro. 100%. And all I'll say to that is let it circle around. This is not, I have no interest in getting into the profession of finger wagging, sorry. I don't think I'm better than anybody. I don't think that, sometimes I don't even think I know that much more than other people. You know what I mean? There are certain subjects that I can talk about, but I'm not an expert on, I may be an expert on narrative structure, but that's the only thing. You know what I mean? It's, I don't know. There's that Toni Morrison quote that kind of rules my life where, if there's a book that hasn't been written, write it. My apologies if I simplify the quote, but yeah, she's always talking. That's the kind of the guiding impetus for my life, where it's basically she's saying improve upon the silence. You know what I mean? If there is a gap in the, I don't think Toni Morrison would say marketplace, but this is my capitalist grind set. Hip hop. She was like, there's a gap in the marketplace. You know what I mean? Fill that. And the thing I'm trying to fill is the I love all of my leftist brothers and sisters who know more than me. I love the Chapo guys. I love the TrueAnon guys. I love the, you know what I'm saying? Shout out Liz, not just guys. But again, I think Liz would be like, nah, identity politics. Rah, rah. But I love all those motherfuckers. I couldn't live my life without them, frankly. Without Will Menaker reading the fucking news, I don't know that I would have made it through the last couple of years. But I do think that often there is a cultural gap between, white leftists and the homies who are in hip hop culture, who are, sometimes subscribe to black and brown capitalism, who are yo, don't hate on the come up, et cetera, et cetera. It's you're talking about an ideal world, ultimately, I want to be a landlord, all that shit. And if we write each other off, we're not getting anywhere. It's going to be a fucking, a wrench in the fucking bike spokes. We're not going to get anywhere. So what I'm trying to do here is close a little bit of a gap. So I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. I hope this made sense to you in some way. I hope this was of value to you in some way. My name is Chris Gabo. I am the host of The Chris Gabo Show. Follow me at me.chrisgabo on all social platforms. That's at Mira Chris Gabo, MiraChrisGabo. That's me on Instagram. That's me on Blue Sky and all that shit. And, patreon.com/The Chris Gabo Show. Also, if you found this on YouTube, I'm here on YouTube. Thank you so much. This episode will be out. Well, it'll be out next Friday. But as I'm recording this, it doesn't matter because, it'll come out on that day. Anyway, I love you very much. Even if I don't know you, I fucking love you. Sorry for yelling. Thank you so much.